All right, it is 7:32 local time. This is Morning Express, and the segment is The Way It Is. In studio with me, we have Dr. Duncan Ojwang, who is a dean at the School of Law, and we also have Steve Ogolla, who's an advocate, as our panelists this morning. And just before we took the break, we're looking at the newfound merger between Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga. Or is it between Jubilee and Orange Democratic Movement? Or is it between Jubilee and NASA? And Steve Ogolla, I want us to move to IMF and the hard economic times that are coming up. But before we do that, just for us to summarize on this and your thoughts to Kenyans by virtue of the fact there is the statement that has been made by our leaders that Kenya is bigger than any individual. But do we as Kenyans actually believe that, or do we follow our leaders to that, given the protracted electioneering period that we're coming from? And let me bring a case in point here where we have Raila Odinga as the leader of NASA, continuously, consistently said that Uhuru Kenyatta cannot be recognized as president, despite the fact what the courts had ruled. But now, suddenly, we have a shift.
I think the reinvigorating message coming from this handshake, what Kenyans must not miss is that you are safer in the law. What the law has ordained, remain in it. Because individuals and politicians, they change positions based on convenience. And we said before that once the Supreme Court has determined the presidential election petition with finality and declared Uhuru Kenyatta as validly elected, and he was sworn in pursuant to the Constitution, and is serving a term of 5 years, any other claim to delegitimize his presidency was merely meant to mainstream your own agenda, political activation, but was not meant for purpose, was not meant to reinstate an electoral agenda in the manner in which NASA said. But you see now, Raila has now left his supporters feeling confused because he said Uhuru Kenyatta is not a validly elected president. Now he signed a document describing Uhuru Kenyatta as His Excellency the President. Kenyans must know that if you follow politicians blindly, you'll be left there wondering what happened. You're safer in the law, remain true to the law, and we must also begin to dialogue about the culture of decency in our politics. You see, it's very difficult. I know people are very cagey and people are very reserved in terms of faulting Raila Odinga because he has made a good step. But what I want us to also dialogue about, it can't be left to Raila and Uhuru Kenyatta to determine when the country is bigger, when the country is smaller, when the president is valid, when the president is invalid, when there's legitimacy, when there's no legitimacy. We have what the Constitution has ordained as the predictable pathway to forming government, negotiating the approach to governance. So even this, if we miss the point of inclusive approach to governance and we start reframing the issues based on the politicians' own ideas, we may find ourselves operating outside the constitutional framework. That's why we've said, let us reflect and let us not be shy to call out our politicians, even during this time of mainstreaming what we think is electoral reform issues. Lesson learned, we are safe in the law, our politicians lack decency, but there's an opportunity now to introduce a culture of compliance with the Constitution, a culture of decency on the nature of our politics, and our own, as voters and as supporters, also to begin to disentangle ourselves from the personal interest of politicians.
Dr. John.
Right, exactly. Well, I've always maintained that we should, as a coping mechanism, I learned a long time ago to lower my expectations. Lower my expectations when it comes to politicians. Even as a Raila voter, I have very low expectation of him, whether he'll deliver or not. And that as a coping mechanism and realistic mechanism can now have me be a master of my life when to pick an issue or when to say this is now politics taking the toll of it. We have to manage and lower expectations. Secondly, I agree with Ogolla that we need to be not a country of individual but constitution. And that is what we call constitutionalism. Because if we are not a country of law, country of rule of law, but country of individual, then we are setting ourselves up for a big failure. We can't be strengthening constitution, we can't be meeting to see how constitution should work or not work, but at the same time remain not a country of law, but a country of individuals.
But Dr. Ojwang, isn't it then a negative thing for you to lower your expectations of your leader, for example, because then that means you're living under par?
No, it is a coping mechanism of the reality that by lowering my expectation is understanding that the leaders are human beings. No man is infallible. No man is always have the master stroke and always have the wild card. Leaders can disappoint, and they do disappoint. Leaders have a binary interest, both individual and national. And so I'm able to put my frame and say, is this a national interest? Is this a supporter interest, or this is individual interest? And finally, I think the power that we have and the challenge Kalonzo, Wetangula, and Mudavadi have, not that they are not creative, not even that they are not bold, but the difference and the tiebreaker supporters. Kalonzo have the kind of supporters that will sit and do risk assessment and say, out of 10, this is 3. And they will say that is too high of a risk. Prime Minister Raila, former Prime Minister, have supporters who will sit and sit and look at the risk and say, this is 10 out of 10, and they say, we'll take it.
We'll still take it.
And that makes a difference. Because if you have supporters who can take a bullet for you, and you have supporters that only follow you when it's when the risk is higher, the advantage is higher than the risk, you don't have a voice. And so what Gitonga I'm saying is that all dreams are valid, but not all dreams are viable.
All right. Steve, as we wind up on this, your thoughts on expectations? Because again, as Kenyans, maybe we've gotten to a point where our expectations are so low, we really do not expect change. I'll give you very practical, simple examples. We sit in traffic for 3 hours, and because our expectations are very low, it's become okay. It is not okay to sit in traffic for 3 hours. We have flash floods every so often. We have people die. We have property destroyed, and it has become okay. It is not okay.
I want, Mr. Gitonga, if this can reach the president, create that agency, that political agency you're proposing and Raila proposing, only for purposes of coordinating political opinion and transmitting the same to the constitutional organs that have that mandate. And I say this because the past offers illuminating lessons for the present and the future. In I think June 2001 up to around October 2002, Raila had a cooperation merger. Remember the NDP Kanu merger? And at that time, he was energy minister. He went into government. That wasn't really disruptive because it was done within the existing framework. Then you had this grand coalition government, which again was in government, I think from 2003, January 2003, to around November 2005. Remember, after they failed the no campaign for the draft constitution. And then now we had the grand coalition government. The common strain in all this, political formations and alliances are based on interest, political interest. As Dr. says, when these interests collapse, those alliances will collapse and we'll be left reverting back to the default. Our default as Kenyans is not Raila's interest, is not Uhuru's interest. Our default is what the Constitution has ordained. The Constitution, Gitonga, if you allow, in terms of governance, if you look at the social conceptualization of governance, the Constitution is supposed to work for our benefit. You get, maintain stability. So if you want peace and security, what does the Constitution, what are the mechanisms, inbuilt mechanisms to assure us of that? You want an accountable, open, and transparent governance. What does the constitutional framework and other laws provide for that? You want a strengthened devolution, dispersal of power and resources. What does the law say on that? You talk about national cohesion, inclusiveness. What does the law say? Move away from passion and discretion of individuals and politicians. As we go forward, I'd like us to coordinate our views, identify what agency can deal with what. If we make the grave and innocent mistake of letting the two technical persons, Paul Mwangi and the ambassador, now to coordinate discussions on devolution, coordinate discussion on national security, coordinate discussion on inclusiveness. Where does that leave? Actually, it works on the reverse. It weakens existing constitutional organs. We will need those organs when these politicians fall out, because I can tell you, as sure as the sun rises in the east and sets in the west, in between, interests will change, the political formations will change, and we'll be left again to revert back to the Constitution. I want us to mainstream this discussion, the national dialogue, within existing frameworks. And if you're saying that our institutions are weak, let us then start dialoguing about those institutions. How do we build their capacity to operate in the manner in which they are intended to?
All right, our safety net is the Constitution and the law.
Right, just a comment, because you see, for example, I come from Mombasa County, and then you find we have not done much with our county resources. But at the same time, as a people, we have been marginalized, and we feel we have been marginalized. We have looked at the political scene, and maybe it has not worked very good for us. And so, as any other creative community, I think we decided that presidency is an avenue of getting equality and getting these resources. And in that presidency, as the destination, people decided that, okay, you, as Prime Minister Raila, you are going to be that vehicle to the presidency. But lo and behold, people have turned Raila to be the destination. He was a means to the destination. The good governance, the lack of marginalization. Remember, even when Obama came, he said how child in Nyanza have a higher immortality rate. The presidency was to be a means, and Raila was to more so be a vehicle to that means. But when you have mixed destination and the means, then now you don't know which one is more important. But if we separate the means and the destination, then we can even look at now the creativity of Raila and say, okay, is this leading us to that destination? And as long as you have destination, you can use a train, you can use a ship, you can fly there, but you are very focused in reaching the destination.
All right, and I think we need to rest that a bit because the other issues I'd like us to just banter on. And let's start with the harsh economic times that Kenyans should brace themselves for. Steve, the fact that IMF gave some regulations and recommendations, and should the government follow on those, then we are likely to face some very difficult times. And one of those would be possibly the removal of some tax breaks on some institutions. And basically just your thoughts on how we can improve the economy and Kenyans possibly be in a better place.
I think the overarching issue is this. The economy has shrunk. What the government needs to do, we need what we may call a prudent and parsimonial approach to governance. The best way to innovate and release or relieve the taxpayer of this burden, because you have money that you can't keep. You've just become sort of a conveyor belt. You earn money, you receive it, you spend it. You receive it, you really wonder, when will you ever liberate yourself economically? If the government is serious about mainstreaming or ensuring economic empowerment, which is their primary mandate, to make sure that we have comfortable living, let the government start by ensuring or implementing austerity measures. There was a time the president implemented or suggested that ministers will take a pay cut and other state agencies. I don't know how far that went, because he was trying, it was not legally backed. It was just sort of a dialogue, and he was trying to encourage them. I think we must have this conversation around maintaining the wage bill below a certain level, so that we release more money for programmatic events. This affects both national government and affects the county government. If you look at the expenditures of the county government, much of it is going on the recurrent expenditures. Less and less of it is being released for development activities, for empowerment issues. I think if we begin with that point of ensuring a prudent and parsimonious application of our resources, reducing wastage and pilferage, reducing theft and corruption, you saw Transparency International Corruption Perception Index still indicates that Kenya is at position 143 out of 183 countries assessed, which means public sector corruption has deepened and widened. Now, if you address that, you would save a lot of money, which can then go to support the economic standards of ordinary Kenyans. I think what we saw recently in the last 1 week, former President Moi went out for medical treatment. We saw Chris Kirubi going out for medical treatment. Where does the ordinary Kenyan go to
Actually,
for medical treatment?
on the start today, we have, I think, 12 members of parliament who have gone to basically seeking medical help in India.
That tells us that, first of all, we should be ashamed of our healthcare system. And if the government and the president is serious, let us, in terms of consolidating its legacy, because now this term It's more about legacy, about ensuring mainstreaming the 4 pillars that he has. Let us see how we can, if we can build malls, and we can build, the real estate industry here is booming. Why can't we coordinate our efforts and hire the best talent and make sure that we have a high-class, a world-class medical facility here in Kenya, because it will create employment, it will make it accessible. But if you have only the elite having access elsewhere, that is an indictment on our approach to governance. Because when I'm sick today and I don't have medical cover, I'll have to queue at Kenyatta National Hospital and risk a dangerous what do you call a mix-up. So I think the government must reflect and change and see how they can cut austerity measures, cut expenditures, and inspire leadership that makes everybody feel like they are near equal, even if they're not.
All right, Dr. John?
Exactly. Right now, with the IMF measures, because we owe them, and so we are becoming against their slaves. And when we look at sovereignty and independence, you cannot achieve sovereignty and independence when you are being controlled because you owe somebody debt. Now, I think that as a country, we need to check on corruption, for example, make better use of our resources. You go to most of government offices, there's newspaper, there's tea, and you see the price is really exaggerated. Government should create an environment for private entrepreneurs to thrive, because government is not good in doing business. In the process, a lot of people, after maybe getting money, there's a story which was saying a lot of people who are our billionaires, you'll check, and one way or the other, it is through some crime. And so if you have made money, instead of sinking them in malls, hoping that these people, the middle class, the economy will grow, they will earn, they will come because they want to eat pizza and lick ice cream and then watch movie, the 3D movies. But there is no money trickling down. That is the economy we have. The economy that is hoping, let me have all of it, and it will trickle down automatically. It doesn't trickle down. So that those malls you'll build, but there are no people to come and invest and partake of those malls. Why don't you do industries? Why don't you make industries? And people will have jobs, and then we can import things instead of exporting things that we can even produce ourselves. And then I think that those, to me, are where the dialogue should be. So that we are saying this constitution was meant to abet corruption. This constitution, if at all, in the preamble, was to have us know that this is our country, that we are the people. How come when I get to a public office, I only think of how to benefit me, and I don't see the implication of lecturers being on strike because there's no pay, of nurses being on strike because there's no pay, of roads not built and canals not opened, and then they see why everywhere. That is because we need internal dialogue with ourselves. And that internal dialogue, in my view, should be asking, what is wrong? Our solution, this is an over-legislated country. We think every solution lies in the law. We should say, okay, we have the law. What is wrong? Because even to follow law, need a moral decision. Whether I'm going to be corrupt or not is not a legal issue. It is almost a spiritual a morality choice.
All right, gentlemen, I think because of time, we'll have to wind up right there. Thank you very much, Steve Ogolla and Dr. Duncan Ojwang, for joining us this morning on The Way It Is. For now, we're going to take a short break right here on Morning Express, but the show is not yet over. We still have Sports Chat coming up, and Robin Toskin today will be looking at 2018 Safari Rally and reviewing how it has been. And, well, do stay with us right here. That's coming up on Sports Chat in just a bit.